Okay, so let's get into some practice problems. So this first one says to find the length of GK given that G is 5, 5 and K is at -1, -3. So looking at my steps here, my first step is to label the points. So I'm labeling these x1, y1, x2, y2, just like what we did for that midpoint formula. So I have x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and write the formula. And so that is that D is equal to, which D stands for distance, x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So my x's are still together and my y's are still together, just like what we did in that the midpoint formula. But this time I'm subtracting them. Okay, next I'm going to plug those points into the formula. And so my x's, my 5 and my -1, are going to go in here. So my x2 I labeled as -1 minus x1, which is 5. And then do the same thing with my y's. So those are all my x2s, or my x's. And then for my y's, so now I have y2, which is -3, minus y1, which is 5, squared. And then now here, I'm going to take this step by step. So my first step is I'm going to go ahead and subtract what's in the parentheses. So my first one, -1 and minus 5, that's -6. And my square is still out there in front. Next one, -3 minus 5, that is -8. And that square is still out in the front. Okay, now my next step is I need to actually square those. So when I square -6, -6 times -6, I get 36. -8 times -8, I get 64. Now that this is looking easier and easier, so 36 plus 64, I get 100. And then when I take the square root of 100, I get 10. And that's it. Okay, let's go ahead and try another one. So this one says to find EF and GH, then determine if EF is congruent to GH. So I want to start with EF. So EF is equal to, so EF, when it says that, that's really just referencing the distance again. So first step, I'm going to label my points. So this is x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to write my distance formula first. So I have x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. When I plug in my values for those, I see my x2 is -5. My x1 is -2. My y2 is 5. And minus my y1, which is 1. So if you notice for my x's, I still left that minus sign there, and I'm subtracting a negative. So one thing that we have to remember here is what happens when we subtract a negative. So when I see two negatives right next to each other, that means I'm really adding a positive. So I can change both of those to plus signs. So this is really -5 plus 2, which is -3 squared. 5 minus 1, which is 4 squared. Well, negative 3 squared, that's just 9. 4 squared is 16. 9 plus 16, I get 25. And the square root of 25 is 5. So that is one answer. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try and do that next one on your own, finding the distance between GH. Okay, so the answer that you should have gotten was 5 as well. So my first step was that I went ahead and labeled. And then here again, you need to be careful with these negatives. So when I did x2 minus x1, so again, I have my x's there. I was really subtracting a negative, so I was doing 3 minus negative 1. And so whenever that happens, you're really adding a positive, so that would be 4. And then same thing with my y. So I had 1 minus a negative 2. Well, when I subtract a negative, again, that's really just a positive, so that became 1 plus 2, which is 3. Then my next step is I squared both of those, so 4 squared I get 16, 3 squared I get 9. And then I need to add those together, and then take the square root. Okay, and then the last part of the question asked me if EF is congruent to GH. So these are both equal to 5, and we learned that when they're equal, then they're congruent. So the answer here is yes. Another way that you can find distance again is just using the Pythagorean Theorem. So you could, especially when you have a picture like this, you could have went ahead and when you're finding EF, went ahead and drew in your sides. So you would have seen that this was 3, this was 4, and you want to find C, so you would have had 3 squared plus 4 squared is equal to C squared, and so on, and you still would have gotten the same answer. So when you get to a test and it asks you to find the distance, I don't care which method you use, you can use either one, as long whatever works best for you. Okay, let's try one last one. So this one says your school is 4 miles east and 1 mile south of your apartment. So let's say my apartment is right here. So I'm going to say A for apartment. My school is 4 miles east and 1 mile south. So 4 miles east, that's to the right. So okay, one like here and here. So let's say this is where the school is at. So it's 4 miles to the right, 1 mile south is down, so it's at negative 1. And then it says the recycling center, where class is going on a field trip, is 2 miles east and then 3 miles north. So the recycling center is right here. So it's 2 miles east and 3 miles north. Estimate the distance between the recycling center and your school. Okay, so we have our 2 points there, so we can go ahead and use the distance formula again. So I can say my distance is equal to x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Go ahead and label my points. So I'm going to say that this one is x1, y1, x2, y2. So my x2 here is 4. My x1 is 2. My y2 is negative 1. My y1 is 3. Well, 4 minus 2, I just get 2 squared. Negative 1 minus minus 3 is negative 4 squared. So 2 squared is 4, negative 4 squared is 16. 4 plus 16, I get 20. And so then the square root of 20, I get 4.5. So it's approximately 4.5 miles. Okay, that's it for today. If you have any questions, you can always inbox me or email. If you need some extra examples, you can look at those below. Otherwise, you can go ahead and get started on the practice if you want to go ahead and move on to next week's. We will spend another day on distance formula because I know it's kind of a lot. Have a great rest of your day.